Beautiful evening to each and every one of you. I hope that you're doing great. And we're very excited to have everyone on this platform. First and foremost, I would like to extend my apologies for the delay in starting, but I'm glad that we are all here and I can see all our platforms, all our panelists are here, and we are ready to kickstart the session. Wonderful. So to everyone that has joined, thank you very much for joining. And I know some people will keep on joining along the way. So we're just going to kickstart the session, and then you can always pick it up from where we are and go back to the recorded session for the parts that you've missed out on. So to those who've joined us today and you're not really acquainted with who we are Next Gen for All, and Next Gen for All is a platform that democratizes access to equitable education opportunities. And what I mean by that is that we have embarked on a journey where we want to, avail information about the various academic opportunities that are out there for students. And how we are doing that is that we have platforms where we kind of post the various opportunities that are there. And so anytime you go on our platforms, that's the one thing you're going to find, that different funding opportunities to different, academic trajectories. And more than that, so it's one thing to share, to share opportunities, but more than that, we want to move the talk to show you that this is something that you can actually do. This is something your fellow colleagues have done, and this is a journey you can also embark on. So how we're also doing that is that we're running a mentorship program. So the mentorship program runs annually. It is for both undergrad and grad. So we take in a number of people with us, within the organization, and then we work with them, look at the application materials, tell them about, the things that are out there that they can venture to, but also hold their hand, and so that they get to move confidently. So again, of course, throughout the mentorship program, we can't really reach out to everyone. So what we do is we organize such kind of spaces where we talk about the various opportunities. We bring Rwandan or African students that have walked the same journey to come and probably shed light on that, and share the tips and everything. But the whole point is to the whole point and the takeaway message should always be that it's a journey that they've walked, which means that you can walk it and probably even do better, because it's just, it's like climbing a mountain. So they kind of set where they are, and then once you know the point where they are, you're even able to move further. So basically that's it in a nutshell. We run last time we had one about a space for undergrads, where if you're from high school, how do you navigate the various funding opportunities and application processes. Before that, prior to that, we had one about Stanford, which was a really amazing platform and so whatnot. So today we are specifically targeting health students. And as you've seen on the various flyers that we've been putting out, you see that all the people that we have today, they have a background in health. And the reason as to why we did that is because for some time people have been reaching out to us, asking us to do things that are more focused, not just general. And we decided to start with health. And most of the times we know, because I know from the registration that we received, we have students from the University of Global Health Equity that are already taking the medicine courses, or those also who are doing the masters at Global Health Equity. We have students from the University of Rwanda doing different, we have those doing dentistry, we have those doing that have a background in public health, environmental health, medicine, things like that. So it's a diversity, but the one common attribute is that all the students on this platform are health related students, if I can put it like that. So what the primary purpose of this platform is that we get to have random students, they will also get to introduce themselves. And they kind of shed light, because given the background, the various opportunities are out there for you as a health practitioner, health student. things that are out there that probably you've not considered, why you should consider them, and also open the gate to even more opportunities that are out there waiting for you. So that's just it. And it's quite an interesting panel that we have, and I would not do an introduction for them. I would just give them the time to introduce themselves. They get to tell us who they are, minus what we saw on the flyer, who they are, what are they working on, and then they also get to share with us a little bit of their journey and a little bit of the journey, so that we can, from there we'll be able to move from that space and then open up the space for the Q&A and also a little bit of discussion after that. So thank you very much for joining us, and to our panelists, thank you very much for taking the time to join this session, and we're really happy to have you. So the person who's going to open up the platform for us is Janvier. So you tell us about yourself, who you are, what you're doing, and events that have led to where you are now. Thank you very much.
Right, thanks, lecturer. I think it's very good to see familiar faces here, and I think that speaks to the mission of NextGen, but also the relevance of this session. So I think when I graduated in 2017 from pharmacy, I was also going through a lot of confusion, and I was also applying to a lot of opportunities, and I get a lot of rejections. So I applied to a lot of Mastercard Foundation scholarships, a lot of other opportunities, even including employment opportunities. And really, I think this platform plays a pivotal role in actually encouraging professionals or students who want to advance their career. So I'm very happy and always very privileged to be part of this conversation and see how I can support those young professionals and students. In terms of background, as I said, I'm a pharmacist by training. But after that, I moved to working. I worked for the Sustainable Development Goals Center for Africa as an intern. And then after that, I joined the Agahozo Shalom Info Village. I've worked there for quite some time in different responsibilities and roles. And I got also to interact with the Mastercard Foundation recently. And I was now, before I joined the Hopkins, I was working with the UN International Trade Center as a national consultant. And basically, what we were working on was to support young women to export fresh produce to Europe and other countries across Middle East and Africa. And then I got the opportunity to join Hopkins as a dual degree program graduate student. So I'm doing MPH and MBA at both schools, Bloomberg School of Public Health and Kerry Business School. And I think I will have to share a lot as we proceed with the conversation. But in a nutshell, that's who am I, and I'm very, very, very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that brief introduction of yourself. So if you're on this platform and you're probably embarked on pharmacy, you did pharmacy in your bachelor's, something like that. So, and you're curious on how you made it all the way to Johns Hopkins, so you can stick around. We'll be able to kind of break that down. So from there, we are moving on to the lady in the house on the panel. Over to you, Linda. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel and NextGen. It's nice to see everyone. So yes, my name is Linda. I'm currently a PhD student at Johns Hopkins and focused on international health. But to even get here, I guess I can start with like undergrad, maybe. I started as a biology major with the hope of going to med school in the US, but because for the longest time I thought I wanted to be a doctor, which is something that I think I'm guessing a lot of Rwandan students, maybe that's the thing of, choice, and that's a career they're taught. But as an international student in the US, I ran into a lot of practical as well as financial barriers to that make med school usually inaccessible for lots of international students. So it kind of pushed me to step back and ask myself why I was drawn to health in the first place, and if medicine was the only way I could really achieve this goal of mine, or so anyways, I ended up going into public health instead, and instead of looking at just individual health cases, I focused more on like prevention and behavior and access to care, and it's more system level. So I ended up doing a master's in public health at the University of Washington, and it's really opened my eyes to like the different pathways for, in the field of public health, either research or program implementation or policy work. And it was also during my master's program when COVID hit. So I ended up coming back home and supporting the COVID-19 like task force, and I was also able to get like some kind of perspective on how to work within public health emergencies in the country. And after my master's, I did 2 years of research coordination for studies around like behavioral health. But during that time, I think I ended up having more questions on how to design better research studies that actually address the problems that are on ground and take into account, human experiences and behaviors. So that's kind of what pushed me into applying for a PhD. And I applied to like 4 programs, and we can get into some of the logistics, but I only got into one, and sometimes you only need one, really. So my current work focuses on women's sexual and reproductive health, and I've done a bit of work with the WHO on like some self-care guidelines for menstrual health. But anyways, across all of these themes, I think one consistent thing I'm learning is that, the journey is not necessarily linear. Like you'll probably take lots of different paths and try to figure out what works for you. So yeah, I'm happy to discuss more, but that's all for now. Thank you.
All right, all right. Thank you very much. And I think well, coming back to what you've mentioned about the COVID response, I remember during the COVID pandemic, a lot of random students at that time doing health were kind of also deployed to help at different focal points. So probably also get to expand on that, how that experience kind of also was fueled your journey after that, after the whole scenario. So thank you very much for that. Yes, we are moving on to Sam. Sam, the floor is yours. We want to also get to know who you are, what are you working on, and the events that have led to where you are now. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you, Rachel, and Janvier and Linda. It's great to be here. It's great to see the faces of people that are interested in pursuing their careers and continuing their academic journey. I think, as Rachel said, it's a journey. It's a lifelong journey if you want to be, to pursue education, higher education. I think it's a journey. So, I'm a health systems researcher. I based out of Boston. I started out not actually in global health or maybe health in general, although I did my bachelor's in healthcare management, but I started out in management of, things like market research and I was interested mainly in management side of things. And so I did market research for some time, basically shaping off-grid energy transition, supporting off-grid communities across Africa. And I later, realized, and that was after I read a book about global health. It was an international organization that was doing a lot of work in global health across, South America, across Africa, and some Southeast Asian countries. And so I thought it was really a meaningful work to be able to pursue. And I had that background in healthcare as well. So I thought to myself that this is something that I can actually pursue and be part of an ecosystem that is making direct changes in people's lives. So I, joined the University of Global Health Equity doing research, academic research administration, and while I was there, I met a lot of people, and I think this is a through line as well. Like the environment you're in and the people you meet actually can shape your destiny, or maybe can shape your choices in life. And so the places you go, places you work, maybe places you choose to work can also inform the decision you make in terms of where you direct your career, especially when you're young and early on in your career. So while I was at the University of Global Health Equity, I interacted with a lot of people, obviously in global health space that are doing research. I had a background in research, analyzing consumer insights, but that was on the business side of things. But I now wanted to go into the business of healthcare, although I had that background in healthcare, but as an education, I didn't have that much pedigree research, and so I had to build out a little bit by reading, by interacting with people, and later I learned about opportunities. I did do some research in mental health when I was there. Did work with an international organization that is based out of Kigali, but they do some work in South Africa, Kenya, and Southeast Asia, and in the US as well. So it's called, it's a Global Engagement Institute. So I was part of a research, at the time they were focused on mental health. And so I became part of that and did some research, and I thought it was really interesting journey to go in terms of how do you create knowledge and new knowledge based on people's suffering and stuff like that. So I got interested in that and wanted to pursue my further education to further my education, especially in the global health space, and just focus on research mainly. And so I did that and I applied as everybody else. It's just, you only need one, but before you get one, you apply to as many programs as possible, as many universities as possible. So it's a journey that is riddled with a lot of failures, a lot of rejections. But in the end, you need one, and you're gonna get one. You should, you do the work and read the requirements, write your essays, talk to people, proofread, basically have a cabinet of people that can be able to read your work and see the program requests that the requirements of the program you're applying to, and then be able to advise you in terms of which is the best way to write your essays. And um, it's a journey. You win some, you lose some, but in the end, you get one. And then in the end, I got one and came to Harvard to study global health. Yeah, it's and I'm now basically doing health systems research. What that means is basically we, you know, look at the data in terms of different interventions and how in terms of how they affect people, and improve lives, and and then be able to inform policy based on the best, maybe evidence-based practices, to be able to scale the best and cost efficient and the cost effective interventions that can be able to scale. So that's what I've been doing, and it's a journey, and I'm not done. Still now looking for. I'm still doing some workshopping around research and what topic I want to do for my grad school for the PhD. But it's been great, and I'm excited to be here to talk to people that are interested in the journey that I've been part of, and to be able to support people that are on this journey as well. And yeah, excited to chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. That was quite a beautiful journey, and something I've taken from the whole round is that it's never a straight line. So you take a lot of corners, a lot of self-discovery along the way, realizing new passions and everything. And And another thing I've loved about the platform is the diversity. We have Janvier with a bit of business aspect. We have Linda, who thought to go into medicine but ended up doing biology, and then jumped into public health sector. And then we have Sam, who is also concentrated on global health, and then mostly on the research bit of it. So that's quite fascinating. So if you're here on the platform and you're kind of curious about how to go about that, you can note down the questions during the Q&A session. We can always come back to that. So moving on to the question part. And so when Janvier, when you were sharing, you mentioned that you did pharmacy in Rwanda. I assume it's at the University of Rwanda. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then after that, you moved into the professional beat, and then you worked at different places, and then eventually you made it to Johns Hopkins. So when you look back at when you're reflecting on your journey, how did your early experiences in Rwanda shape your interest in public health and leadership, and how did they contribute to where you are now specifically?
Yeah, that's a really wonderful question, and especially so being a product of Rwandan education. So I always tell myself that I'm a product, I'm a full product of Rwandan education. Having done the primary, secondary, and tertiary education in Rwanda, and that question is very powerful because it speaks a lot to personal development and also professional development. Early on, when I was at the university doing my pharmacy school, we were a team of a couple of people, and I think one of the things that we did was really effective was really getting involved. So we were involved in everything. So you mentioned it, from training to workshop to attending conferences, organizing campaigns, awareness campaigns. We're really active, and I want to talk about the role of student-led initiative or youth-led initiative. So we were part of an association called Rwanda Pharmaceutical Student Association. And I think through that process and their journey, we were able to get mentored, but also to practice and do mistakes, practice public speaking, practice project management. And we would say after graduation in 2017 that we have like 5 years of experience. And I remember I mentioned to my CV, and I was applying to one of the jobs, and I mentioned I have 3 years of experience. And I asked, you graduated in 2017 and you're applying for an internship. So how do you have 3 years of experience? And I said, we were working on this. And actually one of the project that we worked on, trying to finish the school, we organized the World Healthcare Student Symposium, and we brought about 1,500 delegates from 32 countries. And we were able to raise about 150,000 USD to pull off that conference. And I think that was really impressive at the level of students. It gave us a lot of network. It gave us a lot of experience and insight into the professional work early on before even we get into the professional world. And so I would say that really as a student or a young professional, balancing academics and extracurricular activities is really great. So one of the things that I got to know that I didn't know when I was a student is that, really grades matter. When you want to pursue a career, grades matter. So you've got to have a way of balancing academics and extracurricular activities. And why do I say this? So when you are applying from Rwanda, they usually they rate you as in similar way they rate American students or people who have studied here, and they rate you on a GPA of 4. If you are below 3.0 GPA, so you're now likely going to get an admission. So really just wanted to emphasize on this point to know how to balance both academics and extracurricular activities. So I was lucky. I got a 3.0 that was needed. At the end of the day, you need that. And so I think if I go back to, if I go back to the days, I think I would put so much efforts in academics as well, as I put so much efforts in extracurricular activities. And the other thing is really nurturing your relationships and also continuing to network. It's really your network is your net worthy, and it's really it's a statement, but it's true. When you are at the university, you meet a lot of people, including your academic advisors. And when you graduate, you tend to forget about those people. And then you go back to them 2 years after, you have not talked to them, you have not sent them a message, and then you ask, can you give me a recommendation? So most of them will ignore you. So I think it's really very important to nurture this relationship, continue having a thriving relationship with your academic advisor and also your mentors and your professional peer mentors or friends. And then another thing that I've learned early on again is really how do you manage failures and how do you move on from failures? How do you take them as stepping stone? So when we were students once again and also professionals, so you apply to a lot of things. You try a lot of opportunities. Some of them go through, others don't. And to me, it was always like, I did not pay for this, I did not lose money. So obviously I get disappointed. I can spend a few hours in bed thinking about it. But at the end of the day, I move on and I continue to get involved. And really, having that particular challenge and, just, sometimes, there are really some times when, everything they're trying to try, it doesn't go through. And you start, questioning yourself and your self-esteem is affected. But I just wanted to say that, keep showing up, keep getting involved, keep adding on that CV. The next opportunity will actually get you to another opportunity. So when I was transitioning from Diagahoza Shalom Village to coming back to Kigali and volunteering at the Mastercard Foundation as the co-chair of the youth advisory group, I was really I was doubting my decision to kind of quit a job that was paying me to kind of come back to Kigali to revisit or rethink my professional life. But the amount of networks, the amount of people I met within the foundation, and actually that eventually led to me working with the UN, has been incredible, and it's really good to sometimes to accept to be a volunteer. I think there is power in volunteering. There's power in giving back, and there is power in showing up. And you have to know, how do I show up? In every opportunity, when you are speaking, when you are attending a workshop, how do I show up? How do I make this experience memorable? And also you get to have a story. So you have to have a story, and that story has to be sticky, and everyone should remember you about that story. So in a nutshell, that's really it. And I think those are the things that helped me. But again, the support system of peers, I've been very lucky to have incredible support system with my former classmates and friends now, and I consider them as a family. We push each other very well, and also the support system of family and whatnot. So those are the things that also keep you going, and I can't be more grateful for that. So yeah, I will share more in a minute, but in a nutshell, that's what I can share now. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I'm going to share with you my few takeaways from what you've just shared. Is that number one, I know us as health related students, you find that our primary focus is getting the grades, and you find that we are kind of disconnected with what is happening out in the outside world. And I think that's something that you really come back to, and I feel that it's very important to know that outside what is happening in the classroom, how can I get involved in the various initiatives, and even understanding how this is going to play a major role even in your long-term goals, achieving them, things like that. And knowing how best we can balance the academics and the extracurricular activities, because at the end of the day, you find also that there are these students who are involved in the extracurricular activities a lot, to the extent that it's affecting the grades, but finding a balance where you are involved, yes, but then your grades are also intact, because the reality of the matter is that it's much easier to get these opportunities if your grades are already doing great. And another thing that I would like to come back to is leveraging the network that we get to have. Most of the times these lecturers, you meet them, you're like, okay, I want to be done with this lecture after this class. I never want to meet this person ever again. But we need to realize that these lectures, at the end of the day, they're instrumental in our journeys. If you're thinking about graduate studies or any other probably area in life, they are definitely the people who are going to have to recommend you at the end of the day. They have worked with you, they know you, your personality, and everything. So leveraging that network, not just the lecturers, but also in the initiatives that you are in. And then another thing that you've come back to that I feel that is very important is having a story and knowing how best to tell it. Because you can't, when you're applying, you can't just say that, okay, I am an A student and I'm a high performing student, so you definitely have to give me this program. No, you need to have a story, and a story not just to appeal to the emotional part of a human being, but also a story that shows that there is something that you actually want to change, or there is an impact that you actually want to make. So, in a nutshell, that's what I picked. And I believe we are all learning. For me, I feel like I'm learning a lot. I'm taking my notes right here. So, thank you very much. So, before we proceed to the next person, there is something you mentioned when you were doing your presentation earlier on. You mentioned that you were the co-chair of the Mastercard Foundation Youth Advisory Board. You consulted with the UN International Trade Center. So these are spaces that probably students in Rwanda, we are mostly, number one, not aware of. And even if I get to hear about them, I'll be intimidated to get into it. I know you mentioned that we should not be afraid of interning for free and whatever, but also knowing where those opportunities are and opening them, and getting into them is kind of a challenge. So as a Rwandan student who was part of the Rwandan system and everything, how did you get to meet this such kind of opportunities? What were your approach, and how were they instrumental again to your application and everything, and also shaping, aligning with your long-term goals in general?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thanks. And thanks for really, just, grasping what I said before and asking this important question. Yeah, it's really, it's interesting to approach this question, but some of my friends usually, they always, try to make fun of me when I say that I did my O level, ordinary level high school at College de Butamwa, and
Mm.
and actually after at Groupe Scolaire de Chagrin, and not to say that they were not the fancy schools to go to, but at the same time I think the kind of training that we got at the University of Rwanda, and the kind of involvement, the extracurricular activities, and the networks, the mentors that you meet along the way when you get involved, when you come into these conversations, people you meet, if people will reach out to me, I am happy to support, and we can try to build that relationship off from this conversation and moving forward. So that's how I've been trying to approach life. How do I make use of my networks? How do I build the self-confidence? How do I communicate and things like that? And really, how do you have your personal values? And one of the most important values is really being dependable, and also integrity. If you are asked to do something, how do you deliver? Do you deliver on time? Do you miss deadlines? And all those things speaks to how people perceive you professionally. And I think it's been really helpful to being consistent at delivering, trying to deliver, to the best of your ability, really. And also being open to learn, learn from your mistakes. So I've done, a lot of mistakes, and I still do some mistakes. So and I'm not perfect, I'm still learning. But how do you learn from your mistakes and move forward? So for those spaces, it's about network. So for example, the foundation actually works for young people. They need young people to be part of their platforms. They have different conversations, they have different, conferences and events that you can easily attend. It's about, yes, it's about the information, knowing that it's there. It's about the networks that you have. And it's about how do you use those networks. And then one network gives you another network, and it's a
Yeah.
opportunities and networks. So I would say that's how I see things. Really
Mm.
hold on to your networks and always do self-reflection about your values and how you show up to opportunities. Thanks.
Perfect. I think one thing you've highlighted is that most of the times when you get an opportunity, how you behave in that opportunity determines whether you're going to get the next opportunity. So it means that if you're there, as you mentioned, you have to be dependable. Show them, you belong to be in this space. You want to even do more things like that, so that they can either recommend you or tell you, hey, there's this other opening at this organization X. I believe with everything you've displayed, you'll be the best fit for it. So I think that's what I've picked from what you just said, and I think it's quite an important element, because sometimes you reach in a space and then you just fold your arms and like, okay, I've reached where I wanted to be, so that's just it. But yeah, how you behave determines where you're going to go next. So thank you very
Exactly.
much. We will come back again, but for now, I'm moving on to Linda. So, Linda, when you were sharing, you mentioned that you did your bachelor's, and initially you wanted to do bits of you wanted to do medicine, but then you were not able to learn medicine. You ended up doing biology, and then after that, COVID-19 hit, and then you came back in Rwanda. I'm not sure whether I'm retelling the whole story properly, but you come back to that. So I wanted to like, if you could come back to that. I think it's very important, because most students sometimes, before right now we have the University of Global Health, we have several medical schools in Rwanda, but few years back we didn't have that. We had only the University of Rwanda, and you find that if a person had the grades and everything, the passion to pursue medicine, they apply, but because of the high volume, you find that not everyone is being accepted into medicine. So how did you like handle the detour that initially you wanted to do something but you ended up doing something, and how did you handle that detour? And in the same line, you mentioned that you came back in Rwanda during the COVID-19. You helped with the whole imagine I don't know, the whole support, being on the front line, providing support. So I believe those were defining moments in your career. So I wanted, I was hoping if you could share how these experiences kind of influenced your academic and professional trajectory after that.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that question. So after high school, I had like one of the main things I wanted to do was like focus my career on medicine. I don't know. In my mind, that was like that was what I wanted to do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I had an opportunity to study in the US, and it was through that when I went in and was started off as a biology major, doing pre-med, it's pre-medicine, basically because you don't jump straight to medical school. You have to start off with your first 4 years of your bachelor's degree before you go into medicine. And I was starting off that track. I came across a lot of like academic advisors who just informed me that um, med school for to get into med school for international students, it's already hard in general, but most schools in the US that like it was they only had maybe a 2% slot for international students or none at all. So there was already like barriers regardless of how well I did. So I think that is what sort of detoured me into thinking of other paths. And I took like one public health class, and I actually felt like kind of inspired by what I was learning on how, one's individual health is shaped by, their environment, by the community, by access to certain health services. So that's where I started to explore public health as an option, and then I ended up doing my master's in public health. So it was just like a combination of listening to people's advice and taking different classes that kind of, shaped my decision. But I will also say for those who do want to get into medicine, if you want to study medicine in the US, maybe one option could be study it, in Rwanda or elsewhere in Africa or in Europe or the Caribbean, and then you can come later on for like some kind of residency after you have your medical degree in the US and transition from there, just because there's already a lot of barriers that might be beyond your work. So it's not something about you as an individual. It's just the way the US system already works. So that's just like a piece of advice. So it's not that it's impossible. It's just there's like certain things that you need to navigate. Um, and then your next question was on working for Rwanda Biomedical Center and during the COVID-19 response. Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, so I initially had mentioned that during the COVID pandemic, a lot of health students at that time at the University of Rwanda were also deployed to kind of assist
Yes.
in I don't know whether I can say combating or something like that on the front line, to collect data and sample and everything. So, and you were also part of that space, and I was wondering, how did that experience also shape, open doors for the next stages in life that you ended up taking?
Yeah. So during COVID, I mean, I had a lot of friends who
Mm,
were either in med school in Rwanda or just like had
mm,
other, working within the health system. And I just asked them how to get involved because to be honest, I was bored sitting at home. So
yeah.
then I started off as a volunteer, mainly doing testing, and going to either different sites in Kigali or outside of Kigali. And then that slowly progressed into doing testing at like, airports and hotels. And then I also asked to be part of like the committee that was sort of collecting data to help inform the policies. So a lot of that was through asking around. It was volunteer work for most of the health students. We weren't really being paid. I think we were maybe at most being fed. And then also just like kind of what Janvier was saying, like actually showing up and delivering. And if you keep showing up, you keep delivering on the things that you're asked for, people will trust you more. So, you maybe go from one testing site to managing multiple testing sites to being part of like the committee and saying that no, I can volunteer to write notes. So it was a lot of volunteer work, and then eventually they ended up giving me like a sort of a small contract to work with them. And from there, in terms of how that shaped my work, I think one, it showed me how public health emergencies work, which is something that I was going to learn about anyways, but I was actually there doing it. It showed me how also relatively efficient Rwanda's health system is. I think we actually do a great job in that regard. So of course, there's always room for improvement. But also, it also helped me work on my master's thesis. My master's thesis was looking at how the perspectives of frontliners, which I was, as well as leaders, in shaping the COVID-19 response. But also, it was through that experience that like helped me apply for research coordinator positions. After my master's program. So really all of this started from like asking around and being willing to volunteer, which I know sometimes it's not comfortable to volunteer and work for free, but one thing that my parents tell me is that one, money will always come. Eventually it will come, right?
Yes.
It's okay if right at this point you're still building your skills, you're still showing that you're a reliable person, which is what Janvier was mentioning. It's
Mhm.
okay. Like, I'm not saying that you should not, expect anything, but if at the very beginning of your career, you're either like volunteering or you have like a small stipend, like you're building your career, at some point you will be making more money. So don't be too money focused this is just my piece of advice. Like, focus on building your skills and fostering some of these relationships you have with your mentors, with your classmates, with people, and eventually, money will come. Anyways, thanks. I hope I answered everything.
No, you did. You did. That was really fantastic. And I think one thing you've mentioned is that this time I was on X and I saw a lot of this. It was a conversation that was going on, and then people were I think it was LinkedIn actually. People were complaining that to hell with unpaid internship. We need to move from that. But I think what I've picked from your sharing is that it's very important that we begin with an end in mind. So when you know what you want, right? If I know I want to get to point C, even if and I know the best way to get there is through volunteering, is through, getting into the space and whatever, then I have to be there. I have to show up. I have to show up with my A game, because even from what you've shared, when you're working with RBC and everything, I believe there were a lot of people who were working there, but the fact that your work kind of stood up, you're even able to, land that small contract, and I believe it has been instrumental in everything as you shared. So in every space that we are in, we need to again remember we are health practitioners at the end of the day. So if there is any health related scenario going on, get involved. Show up. Recently we had the Marburg remerging, whatever that happened, and I know there are a team of students who still were able to get involved in such kind of spaces, and I believe that they're always instrumental. Not there are skills that you get from that. They are the network that you get from that. Again, when you're applying to such kind of institution, you need to have a story that you tell. And if I'm reading about Rachel, who performed amazingly but has not been involved, and Linda, who has performed amazingly, but then COVID response, she was there and everything. Already that for me, Linda stands out. So being in such kind of spaces, or also putting yourself up for interning maybe at health facilities, certainly the Sante, things like that, it might not seem as big, it might seem like scope work in one way or another, but at the end of the day, when if probably I want to, venture into public health, in international health, like Linda. For people who are already taking those courses, what do they do to kind of, or what are some of the things that they're working on that I can start working on right now, so that they kind of help in material. So I think that is really instrumental. So I'm coming back to. I wanted us to reflect a little bit of mentorship and growth. So, what role has mentorship played in your journey, and how can students find a nature impactful mentor relationship? Reflecting from your journey.
Well, with mentorship, mentorship doesn't always, in my case, it hasn't always been a formal agreement that, oh, you are now my mentor. Sometimes it's just people who might be either ahead of you in some way or have like certain qualities that you
Mm-hmm.
want and that you hope that you can also emulate one day. Um, and yeah, it's just like maybe just not follow them around, but also just learn from people. Um, because although I have had formal mentors and they have been helpful in their own ways, sometimes it's some of these informal uh, connections that you have with people that have really shaped how I approach things, I look at things, if I even have a few minutes to ask them a question, because another thing, you don't want to burden them too much with your stuff, in my experience, unless they have the time for it. But yeah, just, I don't know, learning from learning from people. Anyone can be your mentor, in my opinion. Yeah. So I don't know if I have the best response for mentors, but rather I think everyone has something they can share, and you can always learn something from them. Um, but even your former supervisor or your current supervisor, you can look at them in a way as your mentor. Like it might not be a formal agreement that this is your mentor, but how do they approach challenges? How do they show up to work? How do they show up for other people? These are lessons that you can learn from them. Um, in terms of fostering some of these relationships, I think you just generally need to learn how to be a good person to others and have good relationships with others to begin with before thinking of like, how can I make this better relationship with my mentor? How do you also treat other people? Um,
Yeah.
because ultimately you're simply bringing out what's already inside. If you're not good to your neighbors, if you're not good to your siblings, if you're not good to your parents, showing up for your boss, one day eventually you'll start to speak to them the way you speak to everyone else. So like try to focus on how to improve your character and, yeah, like work with people. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. I think again it comes down to the networking bit and how you are as an individual, and realizing that whatever space you're in is not there. You're not there by coincidence. It's going to play a role in your journey in one way or another. So before I leave you, if you would allow me one last question, and then I'll come back again. So your research focuses on equitable health systems, right? So if you could share more about your area of focus and what drew you to that, and then I'll leave you.
Yeah. So I actually work mainly on social and behavioral sciences, which basically means I try to understand human behavior as well as like how the health system can work with humans based on, how they present, how they act, how they show up in terms of these complex um, experiences that they're having. I'll give an example with the work I'm doing with WHO. It's like more I'm on the research side where we're looking at self-care guidelines for menstrual health products and management. Um, and although it's not necessarily health systems, it's trying to get at the experiences of women and girls in their experience with menstrual cycles and to shape how the health systems are responding to that? Like, are we providing enough resources for them? Are we giving multiple choices in terms of products that people can use?
Mm-hmm.
Are we listening to people's demands? So I'm kind of more on like in terms of equitable, it means at least for me, I try to understand the human experience and try to make sure that the health system is adapting to those human experiences. So it's not just like, are we being efficient in how we do the work that we do, but also um, how are we like understanding what human beings and people are going through so that the system itself is working for them. Yeah, so that's kind of what I do in terms of equitable health systems. I work both on the individual population side, but also looking at how the system is working for the people rather than the other way around.
Amazing, amazing. And I think you mentioned, or I read that some of the research projects that you're conducting, some are based here. I mean, in Africa,
Yes.
probably not Rwanda specifically.
Yeah,
So that's
so Uganda and Kenya, yeah. But I've also done
amazing,
some work in Rwanda as well.
amazing. Thank you very much. So we are moving on to Sam. So you mentioned that you you did bits of global health delivery. So could you drew what kind of drew you to that, especially at Harvard Medical School, and how that experience has shaped your professional outlook?
Yeah, sure, thanks. So it's kind of like I have a simple, maybe heuristic or maybe cheat code that I always follow. Just adding to what Linda and Jean-Vieux talked about, which is about how to get, even mentors, or maybe how to get interested in anything. How the way you get interested in a topic, because you cannot find a mentor if you're not interested in a certain topic or maybe subject. If you want a mentor, you have to have a topic that you really care about, maybe a subject you care about, and then you can find all sorts of people work. In my case, I read a book. It's called The Introduction to Global Health Equity, and it really got me into how people have actually done the work that changed the course of lives of people. And so I think the simple heuristic that I always follow is the way you find a topic is by workshopping and getting involved. And the way you find a mentor is by, interacting with, or maybe having a topic that you're interested in, and then, reading the work of people that have done incredible stuff that you might want to emulate, or maybe replicate their work, or maybe do similar work that they did. But, you know, in terms of what shaped me, or maybe what shaped the choices that I've made, is obviously fostering opportunities in communities that are doing things that I was interested in. And so when I got to the University of Global Health Equity, UGHE, it was off of, having read the work, the Introduction to Global Health Equity book. And I was able to interact with all sorts of people from across the board. And, the work that they were doing, research, health systems, how they're shaping health systems by just, you know, going out there where there's epidemics and pandemics, and collecting the data and informing local policymakers to basically, use best practices that have worked, or maybe interventions that have worked in other places, and be able to, replicate these interventions in their countries. And so it's the work, you foster the community, you foster the people that you're interested in, and you can only be able to foster a community after figuring out what you really want to do. And I think that's the most important thing. I had a mentor, somebody I considered as a mentor, because it wasn't like a formal mentor. Or maybe took him as a mentor because I was interested in their work. But I was watching them, what they were doing, and I had a chance to interact with them once. And, they told me, early in your career, you have to say more yeses. You have to be open to opportunities. You cannot, say, let's say if you're in a health field, you have to show up to people that are doing research, engage in the community, read the work, even volunteer. I had to volunteer at some point in my career because, and I didn't volunteer because it was, volunteer is not money. It's something you're interested in. It's a team of people you want to be a part of. I talked about GEI, which is the Global Engagement Institute. The way I got in first to work with these people, it was, I thought they were doing incredible work in terms of disseminating best practices for mental health care. And I shoot an email to one of the people that were leading that organization. And probably 3 months in, as a volunteer, I was hired on a full-time basis. And was able to write my first paper, which I actually submitted to, the places I was applying for my grad school. So it's you have to build a resume, I think. And you sometimes you do things out of interest. You don't do things because nobody told me this. Nobody told me that you have to do the research, you have to volunteer, and then you'll be able to get into grad school. So this is an opportunity for you. It's a heuristic to know that you can actually do that and build this resume, and then you probably end up getting an opportunity, maybe getting a chance. And so, um, and every place you get to, like, new opportunities, new information, new knowledge opens up. You find people that are doing different work, and then you get interested in that, and then you read about the work, And so in most cases, mentors are not necessarily physical human beings. Mentors are the work. Yeah, mentors can be, the work of people that are really just speak to you, to speak to your interest. And so until you figure out the interest, you can't be able to say that you have a mentor. And so you figure out the interest and then tap into the work of people that actually do to speak to you. And this now we have the internet, we have AI, and so you can be able to really engage with the work past, or maybe take all sorts of PDFs and books and put them in a certain model. They can be able to break it down for you uh, and tell you maybe specific uh, piece or maybe idea or information that somebody's focused on, and then you can be able to probably go ahead and do similar stuff. So it's really just being interested and workshopping around, really doing, and then the whole thing they talked about of having a good past, or maybe having a good wherever you are, you have to really show up and do the work. If you go to the University of Global Health Equity, I'm not, gonna talk sweet about myself, but I know that I did my best work. In GEI, where I was, I know that I did my best work. And so also the people that write recommendations for you for your next chapter are the people you've worked with. So make sure you do the work and you show up and be a dependable, maybe be somebody that is reliable. So people trust you, and then you can be able to transition easily. The whole career and education, higher education, as I initially said, it's a journey. So you have to make sure that you're doing your best work wherever you are, and your work is going to get you to the next level, and on and on. So yeah, thank you.
Amazing, amazing. I think you've echoed something that this whole journey of studies, it's more of self-discovery. You need to understand yourself and what you really want, because again, sometimes if you don't know that probably I want to do public health, I want to specialize in mental health, I want to specialize in global health, I want to probably be a specialist, probably something like that, then you won't know the right space to be in. So I think that's very key, and I've noted it down for myself. Understand yourself, what you want, and then that will kind of be a compass to show the direction in which you are to embark on. So in your journey, you've mentioned bits of research and how the research article that you wrote was instrumental in your application to graduate studies. So for medical students or health related students who are on this platform right now, what advice would you give them in regards to research and like definitely what how does it make a whole difference venturing into research and having these research articles, especially when you're applying for graduate studies?
Yeah, thank you. Research is, I think it's one, you're contributing to knowledge creation, but also you're learning to think yourself. And so you're tapping into information, certain information, you're tapping into a certain field, and you're really learning deeply about that field. And then you want to uh, create a perspective on your own. And so what that means is basically if you uh, you know, get into a certain topic and you write about it, that's how you really, it's one way to get interested actually. So research can actually be a part of, if you don't have any work opportunity, that as we were talking about, research can actually be the work. And you don't necessarily need to be a part of a certain, let's say, company or maybe a certain institution. You can always do research on your own and figure out, the people you can work with. There's always people that are interested in working on research. If you shoot me an email and say, hey, I'm interested in this topic, do you have any ideas of how to approach it? I do all this stuff all the time. Like people that are students that are starting out that are doing pre-med, they really want to do, let's say, research in neuroscience, so maybe mental health, and they reach out and it's like, yeah, let's meet up and chat. And so research is basically, you don't need to be a part of institution in a way. You can always write a paper, and that is a resume that you build for yourself. When you go to apply, we're really speaking to the work you've already done. That's a solid work, especially for somebody that is into health sciences and life sciences, for that matter. So that's already a great work. And so it's a great work, but you can be able to do without having to be a part of a certain institution. So for I tend to feel like research is designed for health and life sciences people because that's mostly where it makes a lot of sense. But it's I know it's across the board, but if you're into health and life sciences, medical sciences, you are actually the most well positioned person to actually do research, and so and that really adds heavily to your resume and speaks to I see it a lot. Like you interact with the professor here at Harvard and they're like, what research do you do? And so that's the language of actually the people that are in the medical and health field and life sciences field. And so it's a dialect. And so you have to really, have to tap into see if you meet them like, what research do you do? You're like mental health. And I'm like, yes, I work on mental health. What specifically about mental health do you work on? I work on CMDs. Maybe I work on, psychosis. And I'd be like, what are your findings? What are you finding? Where do you work? And stuff. So it's just like, it gives you this whole other, universe of people and, opportunities. It opens opportunities all the time. I can tell you that I got scholarships, doing scholarships here at Harvard because probably of that article that I submitted. And so yeah, it's just it's incredible. You learn about yourself and it's not easy, but nothing actually great comes easy. And so you just have to, if you're into health and medical life sciences field, you really just have to do that. And it doesn't require you to be, you don't have to publish in any big, you don't even have to publish at all. You can just, it's just for you to learn how to think. And there's also all sorts of places you can submit your paper and people to talk to and videos on YouTube, people that are doing meta-analysis, systematic reviews. YouTube can teach you just about anything about, research or anything, you know, YouTube, Google Scholar, everything. So yeah, that's so on and so forth. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. And the reason as to why I wanted us to come back to research, and I think you've mentioned it, sometimes it's, again, if you can have the professional experience to kind of back up your interest and something like that, that's okay. The research bit kind of also plays that role for you, because you find that most of the times when you're applying to graduate studies, they ask you, do you have any research background? Again, if you're applying directly to PhD, they're like, okay, you have time to work on that and everything. But then if you have, that's what you tend to read on the websites. They're like, if you have, that would be okay. Would like, would love to have a look at it, something like that. So, and I know most all health students, part of us to graduate, you have to do your research project. So understanding that that research project is not just something you're going to write just for the purpose of graduating, but knowing that it can be something that can actually be instrumental in, devising the next steps that you are to take. So also, probably taking that opportunity to align it with your next step. Probably if I'm a doctor, I want to do something international health, doing something probably that would align to that. Or if I want to do mental health, doing, showing that, relating the two in my research project, you can always show it as evidence and say, hey, I wrote something about this. So, it kind of, I feel like it's the best way to show that you are really truly interested in something because you've already started doing the working the journey. So we're moving on to the Q&A session. So to the audience, if you have any questions that are there for us and the panelists, of course, you will raise your hand and I'll give you the opportunity to ask the question. But as people are preparing the questions, I'll give one final round, one question, and I think all of you can answer it. What advice can you give to a student on this platform? It can either be one currently embarking on the bachelor's education, a graduate, something like that, but all based here in Rwanda, and they're aspiring to, further their education, probably talking about either if they're in bachelor's, can they move directly to PhD? If that's a possibility, how do they go about that? If they've already done the masters, either the I saw we have some students from Mount Kenya, which is currently Mount Kigali. They've already done the masters and they want to proceed with education. How do they navigate that? What are the opportunities out there for them? How best can they navigate that? Just in a nutshell, and then we move on to the Q&A. To anyone.
So I would say, as we were saying, you have to find a subject that you're interested in. And, if you're starting out, find a subject you're interested in and then figure out a way to probably get involved. And I know that's super, vague in a way, but, we talked about volunteering. You can the capital you have is your time, when you basically starting out. So you have time and you can decide how you spend your time. Am I going to spend my time, scrolling through the internet, which is something that people do now? Or am I going to probably research about a certain company that is doing, maybe organization institution that is doing something that I'm interested in, maybe things that are really interesting to me, and then figure out how to get involved. You can send somebody an email, you can find a way to probably meet people in certain events, and talk to them. And then you can, people like to have people do their work for free. And so you can just go get in there, volunteer, do the work. And that's just because you know what you want, money is not everything, especially when you're starting out. What matters is really growing, making sure you're growing yourself. If you want to be in this intellectual vocation, you really have to focus more on what you're learning, not what you're earning. And so, yeah, I think it's important to get involved, and with the involvement is going to create more information. And then that's in terms of getting into people get from, BA straight to PhD, or maybe bachelor's to PhD. It happens a lot. But maybe Linda can speak more to it, because she's doing a PhD now. But I think, you have to really have the work. You have to have done some work. The people that I know that have, parachuted from be a bachelor's degree to PhD is because they had some research, they've done some research, they've probably been part of some laboratories. Some people that I've met here either been, part of NIH labs and, done some really deep work, and then they parachuted to PhD from bachelor's degree. And I'm not saying that that's only possible in the US, it's possible anywhere. If you do the work and you really figure out what you're interested in, you can just parachute to PhD. Grad school is grad school. And so the reason people tend to workshop around a lot, go through, masters and then to PhD, it's usually people still figuring out what they want to do. Once you have, or maybe you know what you want to do, it's much easier. You can just parachute to PhD from bachelor's degree. And so I think it comes down to the work, and really knowing what you want to do. When you know what you want to do and you do it, you could be, go from college to PhD easily. Yeah, so there's always professors that are interested in working with really young, energetic, impressive people. And if they see your resume, you see your work, why not? You know, it doesn't matter if you did your master's. What matters is the work you've done, and your interest in how you really showed up and put in the work. And they'd be like, hey, this is somebody that I can mentor and get to a certain place, because they know what they want. In life, most things about or maybe revolve around knowing what you want, because otherwise there's a lot of things, attention grabbing things. And so until you figure that out, can you be able to focus and do commendable work? So that's what I can say. That's
Yeah. So I think on the question of can you go straight from your bachelor's to PhD? Yes, but it depends. It depends on your field of interest. Some, like I know for like the public health programs that I've applied to, almost all of them asked for a master's program to have a master's degree. Um, but I also think like I've seen some basic sciences where it's if you're applying for like PhD in chemistry or in biochemistry, or there's certain basic sciences, not like the applied ones or life sciences, where it's okay. It's even encouraged sometimes to apply directly after your bachelor's degree. So in addition to like having a focus, knowing what you want to work on in terms of your research, I think something else that the admissions team looks at is some kind of proven skill, or to show that, okay, this person, like, yes, you're brilliant, you're smart, but do you work well? Not saying necessarily under pressure, but have you shown yourself to work on something for a long period of time? So maybe that's why they'll ask for a master's degree, or maybe that's why they'll ask for, a couple years of work experience. Which you can also definitely get while you're working on your bachelor's, but there are some programs that really want to see a little bit of longevity and a little bit of skill building before entering your bachelor's. Um, so I think, focusing on your why, like why do you really want this PhD? And what skills? I know Sam was talking about like working on some papers, but more than just papers, what projects have you supported? And in what capacity? What can your mentors or your former supervisors say about you? Those are things like these, either actual skills in your writing or your skills in, working with other people. So some of these soft skills, that's where they really need to shine beyond just your grades. Um, Another thing that I don't think we talked too much about, but I really want to emphasize, is improve your writing and your communication abilities. I know now AI can write for you, but it's easy to spot AI writing. So really honing on that skill of writing, and how do you become a better writer? Just write, but also reading. Like I think this thing of just opening a book, either fiction, nonfiction, and actually reading, improving your vocabulary. Another thing is actually learning how to communicate. Something I notice a lot in this, maybe as a generalization, in Rwandan youth, is like you have such brilliant ideas, you're so smart, but you don't know how to communicate. You're not, like, I don't know if it's just a fear or something's holding you back, or if you're worried that you maybe don't have the best English or have a good accent, but try to push past that fear and learn how to share your ideas. You have good ideas, share them, and work on your writing skills. So I think those are the things I would probably really advise on, as like if you want to move through to like further education. Writing and communication, in addition to that specific field that you're in, are very important skills to have, but also in life in general. So yeah, that's all I'll add.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you very much. And because of the interest of time, I have some questions that have been sent to me via inbox, and I would like to read them, and then you can always jump in and answer the queries. So we have one from Miss Marie. I don't think she's Rwandan. So we kept on mentioning that, Rwandans and everything. So I guess we have some students outside Rwanda. So excuse us for that. This information is regarding all students, regardless of where you are. It applies, it cuts across to everyone. And then we had a question from a person called Jean-Claude. He asked, my question goes to Linda. I am currently doing my bachelor's in public health at the University of Debrecen, Hungary. And my question is, do you think it is easy to get an admission in MPH at Johns Hopkins without experience in working? Like, what can you tell someone aspiring to pursue his further studies there? Any activity or program recommendation is highly appreciated. That's from Mr. Jean-Claude. In a few seconds.
Yeah, in a few seconds. Thank you for that question, Jean-Claude. I actually didn't do my master's at Hopkins, so I'm not sure what the requirements are, but the MPH, I do know from what I know, I feel like that question would be better for Janvier. But from my understanding of the MPH specifically, it's a very fast track degree. It's about 11 months, so less than a year. And it's usually geared to people who already have work experience. There is another master's program. It's called MSPH, Masters of Science in Public Health. That one tends to take students from bachelor's degree with not as much work experience. So yeah, you'll just have to go and research on like which programs don't require like much work experience and you can go straight. But I do know the MPH program really oftentimes is for people who have worked. So I'll try to find the Masters of Public Health for at Hopkins, but I do know other MPH programs, like the one I did was at University of Washington, did not require a ton of work experience. And the work experience, maybe I could say, was I did a bit of research while I was an undergrad and I volunteered. So it was not an extensive thing, which is understandable that undergrads might not have, a very extensive work history. But it's really how you package what you've done. So if you've written some assignments, worked on projects as a student, volunteered, you can really write about that. And even if it's not extensive work history, which is fine and understandable, but really it's how you explain that. So I'll try to find that Masters of Science and share it with you.
Thank you very much. On to the next question. Thank you for this great conversation. I'm happy to hear from my colleague Janvier and others, Linda and Sam. I have a question about scholarship opportunities to people working in private sectors compared to public sector. How someone can overcome this challenge? We all have to position ourselves in the public sector. So this is from Mr. Emmanuel. So the question is, I have a question about scholarship opportunities to people working in private sectors compared to public sectors. How can someone overcome this challenge? It's like, I think what he's trying to echo is that people in the public sector are favored when it comes to opportunities as opposed to private sector. And how can he overcome the challenge?
I don't know if I actually know the answer to that question of public versus private. But I do think if you're working, I don't know, in a public sector, really, I would say again, how do you look at your statement of purpose or your in your application or your letter of intent, leverage those opportunities that you have in the public sector. And I'm really not sure. It depends on the scholarship program, but I haven't really heard of this favoring. So it's really just focus on what you do have and then try to leverage from there. But I don't know if Sam, if you have an actual answer for that.
Sure. I think I could just add, it doesn't matter where you work. I think it's just like the contribution you made. And if you can really be able to articulate those contributions well, it does work is work. Anywhere you do contribute, it's just going to be, it's show in your essays and it can be valuable. It doesn't mean that there's a lot of, actually, most organizations that are doing or maybe changing lives are not necessarily public. They're private organizations, entities that are international charity organizations that are coming in these low middle income countries and doing great work. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be public. It's just that, can you articulate your contributions you made anywhere you were? So yeah.
Yeah, I think that is quite true because unless the opportunity specifically says it's targeting probably people in the public sector, but if not, it all goes down to you as a person, the experiences that you gain, the journey that you've walked, regardless of whatever the sector is. And then there is another question here from one called Pascal. He's saying, getting practical with my example to ask my question well. I started while working and and he started working. He started working while studying, which resulted in him getting a low GPA of 2.6 in biochemistry, but got a lot of work experience from NGOs and government institutions. So he's asking whether he will be eligible for opportunities in the US to move forward with his career and vision. So his GPA is low, but then he has a work experience. So how would you advise that person to move forward in terms of applications?
I think again, leverage on what you already have. Even if you have a relatively low GPA, that doesn't mean that you're completely out of, the game. It doesn't mean that you have no future. I think some of us, like, while we're talking, we've shared our failures. Like, I've had to retake some classes throughout my journey. There were times when I didn't do that well, but I think still submitting an application, leveraging on what you have, talk about your research experiences or your experiences in the NGOs. You can still talk about them and, write your letter of not letter of recommendation, your statement of support. I don't know what to call it exactly. The letter that you submit in addition to your GPAs and everything, to highlight mostly the NGO work, or maybe even talk about like some of your failures. Like, we don't talk enough about our failures or the lessons we've learned. Not saying that you should look at your low GPAs completely like as a failure, but look at it as like a lesson that you've learned. Okay, like, you got this relatively low GPA, but you still, you still passed, still graduated. You still got certain skills from it. You still got lessons from it. You still worked at these NGOs. You can very much apply for a position, and you'd be surprised. Like, they don't just, with admissions, grades are important, but they don't only look at your grades. They'll have a more holistic approach. So don't feel discouraged and just keep trying and leverage what you already have. And if that means getting a few more work opportunities, or maybe signing up for another online course to supplement for what you haven't done well, you can try to do that.
All right, thank you very much. That has been quite an insightful panel and session. And I believe that each and every person that was on this part of this audience really had a lot to learn and a lot to reflect on. And as we close off the panel, I want to ask one last question that's going to cut across. And then that would bring us to the end of the whole question. The questions are still coming in, but for the interest of time, I think maybe the people would, for people who still have questions, they will still reach out to us on a social media platform, and probably the panelists, if they're okay, they can also be able to share the social media handles, so that if you have questions specific to someone, you can always reach out to this person for further conversations. But looking back, where you are right now, when you look back on your journey, when you do some sort of reflection, what advice could you give to your younger self that could make the outcomes a little bit better? And also in the same line, what advice are you also leaving to all the students on this platform, either I won't say random students again. I understand there are several students. So to all the students here who are doing health, either bachelors, trying to navigate the whole application process and everything, just one advice you would give them to keep them moving. Yeah. And then we'll be coming to the end of the session.
Yeah, I think we're first. So I think one advice is to my younger self, I would say would be just your capital is the energy you put in everything you do. And when you're younger, that's the only leverage you have. You have time. And so you use the time to basically get involved. Get involved, find something you're interested in, pursue it, workshop around. You never know exactly what you're interested in, as I said, until you really get involved in real work. Another thing I think is, you know, I struggled with, I think, imposter a lot, and I think probably most people do. But I've realized that, we're all equal. People go through a lot of imposter feeling like, as we just said, we just looked at somebody, said GPA, my GPA is low, this and that, but it sounds like you've done the work and you've, had some experiences. So anything that happens to you, you can always respond to it. You can always, um, you know, some circumstances are natural, like you never chose to be in certain circumstances. So, and you have also to operate on a sort of like a rule of thumb that says that, if I work hard, I can always figure things out. So it doesn't matter where I start. It matters the work that I put in, and I don't control the results, but I control the work that I put in. So basically,
Mm.
that's what I can say.
Yeah, I would say there's this like thing my P4 teacher, primary four teacher used to say is like try and fail, but never fail to try. I don't know if you've heard someone say that, but I think ultimately is it's just like persistence is key. I think persistence goes even further than just your talents and your skills, but if you keep just showing up, keep trying, even if you'll fail one time, you'll fail again, and maybe the third time you'll be able to get up and, I think Janvier is the one who started by talking about how immediately after his going through pharmacy school, he experienced a lot of failures, but he eventually landed where he wanted to land a couple years later. So there's just this thing of keep trying, and if it doesn't work this way, maybe try a different method, but ultimately just don't fully give up. I know it's such a cliche, but don't fully give up on your hopes and dreams. So
Amazing, amazing. So from everything that you've shared, I have also my key takeaways from the whole session is things that really kept on coming back to me was that number one, it's very critical to discover your interests, not just as a health student, to any student that is here on this platform that probably you're not doing health. It's very important to know your interests. Once you know your interests, you'll be able to know the right spaces to be in, the requirements that you need, to further your whole career journey. And the other thing will be to get involved. If you don't get involved, maybe in terms of networking, get conferences, events or volunteering activities, if you don't get involved, then you will not know how. Actually, it's in Kinyarwanda that they say that a bird that has not flown does not know where the harvest is. So when you get involved, you get the opportunity to be in touch with these professors, know what is trending in the medical field, what is going on, because at the end of the day, all of these inform your career trajectory, your interests, but also the academic journey that you're supposed to embark on. And another highlight that I also took was that the journey is not linear. So sometimes we expect that, okay, I want after my bachelor's in medicine, I want to do an internship after in 1 year, and then after that 1 year, I want to probably go to Johns Hopkins or Harvard or any other institution and do this. But the reality of the matter is, life is not a straight line. So there are ups and downs, and I think Janvier came back to this. You find that this is how you plan things to work out, but then when you get on the ground, probably you have to first do some business, you have to do some whatever activities. But one thing you have to keep in mind is that, as Mr. Sam said, as much as we can control the results, we can always control the work that we're putting in, knowing that, regardless of the detour that I'm experiencing, I know where I want to be and where I should be. So working, leveraging where you are to get to the next point that you want to get to. And then also, it's very important that you build on our network. And I feel like this is a very important point because I remember, again, for us in school, when I was still doing my bachelor's, sometimes you just want to do away with the lecturer and, I never want to meet this person in my life. But knowing that this person is going to be instrumental in everything, in mentoring you as a person, because again, they've been in the field for quite a minute and there's so much they know that you don't know, the network and everything. So leveraging that, knowing that each and every aspect that you're going through is going to contribute to something bigger in the next steps of your career. And then also Linda mentioned that it is also very key to try and fail, but never fail to try. Because again, I think Linda and Janvier are the ones who mentioned, there are a lot of failures along the way. But for me, it's not more of failures than lessons, because at the end of the day, you find that the detours also contributed to where you are right now. So knowing that regardless, if today I apply to this, got rejection or what, that's a lesson. Understand, why did I get in? How best can I do it better in the next application? Something like that. So to keep on going, persistence, as she mentioned, because sometimes even if you don't have the talent, but then you have the persistence to do something, you still end up, getting to where you want to be. So basically, that's it in a nutshell. For me, there was a lot that I gained from this session, and I hope each and everyone that was able to make it to this session, they were also able to pick a thing or two. And I want to say thank you for everyone who made it to the session. We are more than blessed to have all of you, and to our panelists. Thank you very much for taking the time to come share with us the journey, the torch. Sometimes, most of the time as a student, it's like you're walking in darkness, but having someone in the front kind of shedding light on the journey becomes much easier to walk that journey. So thank you very much, and we hope that you stay in touch, and we'll be reaching out to you for other things. And also, I believe from the audience for research, career journey, and everything, more information about getting to Harvard or Johns Hopkins, I believe they'll be reaching out to you for more information on that. So thank you very much. Murakoze cyane. I think we've come to the end of our session, and that will be it from us.